My husband's car was in the driveway all night, but his shoes were missing from the hall. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I thought I knew my husband. I really did. After 12 years of marriage, you think you know every habit, every quirk, every pattern in a person's daily routine. You think you can predict their movements like clockwork. You think there are no surprises left. I was wrong. My husband's name is James. We met in our late 20s at a friend's barbecue. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I fell for him slowly, the way you fall for someone who feels safe. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He was steady, reliable, the kind of person you could build a life with. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It was simple, just the two of us on a hiking trail we loved, with the sunset painting the sky orange and pink. He got down on one knee, right there on the dirt path, and asked me to marry him with tears in his eyes. I said yes before he finished the question. Our wedding was small, family and close friends. We honeymooned in a cabin by a lake, spending our days fishing and our nights by the fire. It was perfect in its simplicity. We didn't need grand gestures or expensive trips. We had each other, and that was enough. We bought a small house in the suburbs 3 years into our marriage. It was nothing fancy, a 2-bedroom ranch with a decent-sized yard and a garage. But it was ours. We spent weekends painting walls and planting flowers and turning that house into a home. James built shelves for the living room. I hung curtains and arranged furniture. We made it beautiful together. Our life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James worked as an accountant at a firm downtown. Regular hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. He was good at his job, detail-oriented and thorough. His co-workers respected him. His boss trusted him. He brought home a steady paycheck, and we lived within our means. I worked as a nurse at the local hospital, rotating shifts, sometimes days, sometimes nights. It was exhausting but fulfilling. James was always understanding about my schedule. He'd have dinner ready when I came home from a late shift. He'd rub my feet while we watched TV. He took care of me the way I took care of him. We had our routines. Every morning, James would wake up at 6:30. He'd shower, get dressed, make coffee. I'd join him in the kitchen if I wasn't working, and we'd have breakfast together. Toast and eggs, usually. Sometimes oatmeal. We'd talk about our plans for the day. Nothing deep, just the comfortable small talk of two people who knew each other well. He'd leave for work at 7:45. Every single day, 7:45. He was punctual to a fault. He'd kiss me goodbye, tell me he loved me, and walk out the door with his briefcase in hand. He'd come home at 6:15. Again, like clockwork. I could set my watch by him. I'd hear his car pull into the driveway, the familiar rumble of the engine, the sound of the garage door opening. Then he'd walk in through the side door that led from the garage to the kitchen, and the first thing he'd do, always, without fail, was take off his shoes. James was particular about shoes in the house. He'd grown up in a household where shoes came off at the door, and he'd carried that habit into our marriage. His work shoes would be placed neatly on the mat by the door. Brown leather Oxfords, polished every Sunday night. They'd sit there in the entryway, perfectly aligned, until he put them on again the next morning. It was such a small thing, those shoes by the door, but it became one of those details that defined our life together. When I came home and saw his shoes there, I knew he was home. When they were gone, I knew he was out. It was a simple system, and it worked. Our evenings followed a pattern, too. We'd have dinner together at the kitchen table. I'd cook most nights, though James would help chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, setting the table. We'd talk about our days. He'd tell me about spreadsheets and client meetings. I'd tell him about patients and hospital drama. Normal stuff, Mundane stuff. The stuff that makes up a life. After dinner, we'd clean up together. He'd wash, I'd dry. Then we'd move to the living room and watch TV. We had our shows, crime dramas, comedies, whatever was on Netflix. We'd sit on the couch, my feet in his lap, his hand absently rubbing my ankle. Sometimes we'd talk during the show. Sometimes we'd just be quiet, comfortable in the silence that came with years together. Around 10, we'd head to bed. James was an early sleeper. He needed his 8 hours, or he'd be grumpy the next day. I'd usually read for a bit while he fell asleep beside me. I'd listen to his breathing slow and deepen, and I'd feel safe. Content. This was my life, and I was happy with it. We didn't have kids. We'd talked about it early on, decided we were okay without them. Maybe we were selfish, or maybe we just liked our quiet life the way it was. Either way, it was a decision we'd made together, and neither of us regretted it. We had friends, but not a huge social circle. We'd have dinner with another couple once a month or so. We'd go to the occasional party, but mostly we kept to ourselves. We liked our routines. We liked our peace. Looking back now, I wonder if that's why I didn't notice when things started to change. The changes were so gradual, so subtle, that they slipped past me like water through fingers. It started about 6 months ago, small things at first. James became quieter. He'd always been on the reserved side, but this was different. He'd come home from work and barely say 2 words during dinner. When I asked about his day, he'd give 1-word answers. Fine. Busy. Same as always. I chalked it up to work stress. Accounting firms were demanding, especially during tax season. I figured he was tired, overwhelmed. I tried to be supportive. I'd give him space when he seemed withdrawn. I'd make his favorite meals. I'd suggest we skip TV and just go to bed early so he could rest. But the quietness persisted even after tax season ended. And then there were the other things. He started staying up later. Not every night, but a few times a week, he'd tell me to go on to bed without him. He'd say he wanted to watch 1 more episode, or he had some work to finish on his laptop. I'd wake up around midnight sometimes and find his side of the bed empty, the light from the living room glowing under the bedroom door. When I'd get up to check on him, he'd be on the couch with his laptop, eyes fixed on the screen. He'd look up when I appeared, and something in his expression would shift. Surprise, maybe, or guilt. Though at the time, I told myself I was imagining it. Come to bed, I'd say, and he'd nod and close the laptop and follow me back to the bedroom. But he'd be tense beside me, taking longer to fall asleep. Then there were the phone calls. His phone started ringing at odd times. He'd glance at the screen, and his jaw would tighten. Sometimes he'd answer and step outside or into another room. Sometimes he'd just let it ring. When I asked who was calling, he'd say it was work, a client, nothing important. His phone became glued to him in a way it hadn't been before. He started taking it everywhere, to the bathroom, to the garage when he was working on something, even to bed, tucked under his pillow. He'd changed the passcode, too. We'd always known each other's passcodes, one of those small intimacies of marriage. But one day I picked up his phone to check the time, and the code didn't work. When I mentioned it, he said he'd had to change it for work security reasons. Something about new company policies. Maybe that was true. Or maybe I wanted it to be true. He started going out more. Not often, maybe once or twice a week. But it was a change from our usual routine. He'd say he was meeting a colleague for drinks, or he had to run to the office for something. He'd be gone for an hour, maybe 2. He'd come back smelling like outside cold air and sometimes cigarette smoke, though James didn't smoke. When I asked about it, he'd say someone at the bar had been smoking nearby. His temper shortened. James had never been an angry person, but suddenly he'd snap over little things. If I forgot to pick up milk at the store, if I asked too many questions about his day, if I suggested we do something together on the weekend, he'd apologize afterward, say he was stressed, that work was getting to him. And I'd accept the apology because what else could I do? The intimacy between us faded. We still had sex occasionally, but it felt mechanical, like he was going through the motions. He'd finish quickly and roll over, falling asleep without the pillow talk we used to have. I told myself this was normal. Marriages go through phases. The passion fades, but the foundation remains. We'd been together 12 years. This was just a rough patch. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I felt it. The distance growing between us. The sense that something was wrong, fundamentally wrong, in a way I couldn't quite name. I tried talking to him about it once. It was a Saturday morning, and we were having coffee in the kitchen. The sunlight was streaming through the windows, and everything looked so normal, so peaceful, that I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe everything was fine. "James," I said carefully, "is everything okay? You seem distant lately?" He looked up from his newspaper, his expression neutral. "I'm fine. Why?" "I don't know. You just seem stressed, like something's bothering you." "Work is busy," he said, turning back to the paper. "That's all?" "Is there anything I can do to help?" "No, it's fine. I'll handle it." And that was the end of the conversation. He didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't push. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself to trust him. We'd been married for 12 years. Surely I would know if something was seriously wrong. But the unease stayed with me, a constant low hum of anxiety that I couldn't shake. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in late October. I'd worked a day shift at the hospital and come home around 7. James was already home, which was normal. His car was in the driveway. His shoes were by the door. He was on the couch watching TV when I walked in. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag by the door and walking over to kiss his cheek. "Hey," he replied, barely looking at me. I made dinner spaghetti, nothing fancy. We ate in silence. I tried to make conversation, but his responses were clipped. "Fine." "Okay." "Yeah." After dinner, we cleaned up and moved to the couch. We watched a show, but I couldn't tell you what it was. I wasn't really paying attention. I was too aware of the space between us on the couch, the way he sat rigid and separate from me, instead of relaxed against me like he used to. Around 9:30, I said I was going to bed. I was exhausted, emotionally more than physically. James nodded and said he'd be up soon. I brushed my teeth, changed into my pajamas, and climbed into bed. I tried to read but couldn't focus. I turned off the light and lay there in the darkness, listening to the muffled sound of the TV from the living room. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, I was waking up. The room was dark. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. I reached across the bed for James. His side was empty. That wasn't entirely unusual. Sometimes he'd fall asleep on the couch and wake up in the middle of the night to come to bed. But something about the emptiness felt wrong. The sheets were cool, like he'd never been there at all. I lay there for a moment, listening. The house was silent. No TV sounds, no movement, just silence. I got up and walked to the bedroom door, opening it quietly. The hallway was dark. I could see the faint glow of the stove light from the kitchen, but otherwise, nothing. "James?" I called softly. No answer. I walked down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The living room was empty. The TV was off. His laptop wasn't on the coffee table. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The kitchen. Empty. A knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. Where was he? I walked to the front window and looked out at the driveway. His car was there, the same spot it was always in, so he hadn't gone anywhere. But then, where was he? I walked back to the entryway, intending to check the garage. Maybe he was out there working on something, though I couldn't imagine what at 3 in the morning. And that's when I saw it. Or rather, didn't see it. His shoes weren't there. The mat by the door was empty. The brown leather Oxfords that should have been sitting there, perfectly aligned, were gone. I stood there staring at that empty mat, my heart starting to pound. His car was in the driveway, but his shoes were gone, which meant he'd left the house. But how? On foot? In the middle of the night? Where would he go? I pulled open the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The October air was cold, biting through my thin pajamas. The street was empty and quiet. No cars, no people, just the yellow glow of streetlights and the dark shapes of houses. I walked down the driveway to his car and peered through the window. Empty, nothing unusual inside. I went back into the house and checked every room again. The spare bedroom, the bathroom, the laundry room, the garage. He wasn't anywhere. I stood in the middle of the living room, my mind racing. Should I call him? But his phone was probably with him. Should I call the police? And say what? My husband's car is here, but he's not? Maybe he went for a walk. Maybe he couldn't sleep and went for a walk to clear his head. At 3 a.m, in October. Without telling me. No. That didn't make sense. I sat down on the couch, pulling a throw blanket around my shoulders. I was cold, both from the outside air and from the fear creeping through my veins. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. I waited there in the darkness, listening to every sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the house settling, the distant sound of a car passing on the main road. An hour passed, then another. The clock in the kitchen ticked away the minutes, each one stretching longer than the last. At 5:23 a.m., I heard it, the sound of the side door from the garage opening. I stood up quickly, the blanket falling to the floor. James walked into the kitchen, moving quietly, like he was trying not to wake me. He was wearing his shoes and his jacket, like he'd just come in from outside. He froze when he saw me standing there in the living room. "You're awake," he said. His voice was calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Where were you?" My voice came out harder than I intended. "What do you mean?" Don't do that. Your car has been here all night. Your shoes were gone. Where were you?" He set his keys down on the kitchen counter slowly. "I couldn't sleep. I went for a walk." "For 3 hours?" "I lost track of time." "James." I walked toward him, searching his face for the truth. "What is going on?" "Nothing. I told you, I couldn't sleep." "Stop lying to me." The words burst out of me, louder than I meant them to be. "You've been lying to me for months. The late nights, the phone calls, the distance. And now you disappear in the middle of the night and expect me to believe you went for a walk?" His jaw clenched. "I'm not lying." "Then tell me the truth. Tell me where you really were." He stared at me for a long moment. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between whatever secret he was keeping and his loyalty to me. Finally, he said, "I can't." Those 2 words hit me like a physical blow. "You can't," I repeated. "I'm sorry, but I can't tell you." "Can't or won't? Does it matter?" "Yes." I was shaking now. Whether from cold or anger or fear, I couldn't tell. "Yes, it matters. I'm your wife. We've been married for 12 years, and you're telling me you can't tell me where you were?" He looked down at the floor. "I'm sorry. Is there someone else?" The question came out before I could stop it. "Is that what this is? Are you having an affair?" His head snapped up. "No, God, no. It's nothing like that." "Then what? What could possibly be so bad that you can't tell me?" He opened his mouth, closed it, shook his head. "I can't." I felt something break inside me. The trust, the foundation, the belief that I knew this man. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out. Go to the spare bedroom. I can't look at you right now." He nodded slowly, his expression pained. But he didn't argue. He didn't try to explain. He just picked up his keys and walked down the hallway to the spare bedroom, closing the door behind him. I stood there in the kitchen as the sun started to rise, painting the sky outside in shades of pink and orange, and I realized that everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my husband, about my life, was built on sand. And it was all crumbling beneath my feet. Over the next few days, James and I existed in a state of Cold War. We were polite but distant. He slept in the spare bedroom. We barely spoke beyond the necessary logistics of sharing a house. He went to work every day at his usual time, came home at his usual time. But the easy comfort of our routines was gone, replaced by a tense awkwardness that made my stomach hurt. I couldn't stop thinking about that night, about his missing shoes, and his 3-hour absence, and his refusal to explain. I played it over and over in my mind, looking for clues I might have missed, and I started watching him more carefully, paying attention to patterns I'd overlooked before. I noticed that the nights he stayed up late, his car would still be in the driveway in the morning, but I had no proof he'd been home all night. How would I know? I was asleep. He could have left and come back, and I'd never know. I noticed that some mornings his shoes seemed dusty, like he'd been walking on dirt roads. Our neighborhood was all paved. Where had he been walking? I noticed that his phone buzzed more frequently now, and he'd glance at it with that same expression tension mixed with something else. Anticipation, maybe, or dread. I wanted to confront him again, but I didn't. What was the point? He'd made it clear he wasn't going to tell me anything, and part of me was afraid of what I might learn if I pushed too hard. But I couldn't just let it go either. The not knowing was eating me alive, so I did something I never thought I'd do. Something that felt like a violation of privacy and trust, but maybe there was no trust left to violate. I started following him. It started small. One evening, when he said he was going to the office to pick up some files, I waited a few minutes after he left, then got in my car and drove the route to his office. His car was parked in the lot. Okay, so that time, he'd been telling the truth. But the next time he said he was meeting a colleague for drinks, I followed him again. He didn't go to any bar I recognized. He drove to a part of town I rarely went to, older houses, narrower streets. He parked on a residential street and got out of his car. I parked a block away and watched as he walked up to a small blue house and knocked on the door. A woman answered. I was too far away to see her clearly, but she looked young, 30s maybe. She smiled when she saw James. He went inside. The door closed. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This was it. The affair I'd asked about. The other woman. The reason for all the lies and secrecy. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt sick. I waited for 2 hours, watching that blue house, imagining what was happening inside. When James finally emerged, he looked tired but not disheveled. He got in his car and drove home. I waited another 10 minutes, then drove home myself. When I arrived, his car was in the driveway, his shoes by the door. He was on the couch watching TV like nothing had happened. I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed more information first. Over the next week, I followed him twice more. Both times he went to the same blue house. He'd stay for an hour or two, then leave. I started doing research. I found the property records for that address online. The house was owned by a woman named Sarah Mitchell. I searched her on social media, found a profile with a private account. Her profile picture showed a woman with dark hair and a warm smile. No other information was public. Who was she? A girlfriend? A mistress? Someone from work? I felt like I was losing my mind, playing detective in my own marriage. This wasn't who I was. I wasn't the suspicious wife who stalked her husband and dug through his secrets. Except I was now, because my husband had given me no choice. I decided I needed to know more about Sarah Mitchell. So I did something even more invasive. One afternoon when James was at work, I drove to that blue house and knocked on the door. My heart was pounding as I waited. Part of me hoped no one would answer. Part of me hoped someone would, so I could finally get some answers. The door opened. Sarah Mitchell stood there, looking at me with polite confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked. Up close, I could see she was probably in her mid-30s. Pretty, but in a tired sort of way. She had dark circles under her eyes. "My name is Elizabeth," I said. My voice sounded surprisingly steady. "I'm James Hartley's wife." Her expression changed instantly. The politeness vanished, replaced by something that looked like panic. "Oh," she said quietly. "I think we need to talk," I said. She hesitated, then stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in." I followed her into a small living room. The house was modest but clean. There were toys scattered on the floor, children's toys. Sarah sat down on the couch and gestured for me to take the armchair across from her. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, she said, "He told you." "Told me what?" She looked confused. "He didn't tell you? Then why are you here?" "Because my husband has been sneaking over to your house for weeks, lying to me about where he's going, and refusing to explain why. So I'm here to get answers since he won't give them to me." Sarah's eyes widened. "He hasn't told you anything?" "No, nothing." She put her head in her hands. "Oh, God. He promised he would tell you. He said he was going to tell you weeks ago." "Tell me what?" My voice rose. "What is going on?" Sarah looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I'm his sister." I stared at her. "What?" "I'm James's half-sister. We share a father." The room felt like it was tilting. "That's impossible. James doesn't have any siblings. He's an only child." "That's what he thought too," Sarah said softly, "until I found him 6 months ago." She stood up and walked to a bookshelf, pulling out a manila folder. She handed it to me. Inside were documents, birth certificates, DNA test results, letters. "Our father had an affair," Sarah explained as I looked through the papers. "Before he married James's mother. My mother got pregnant. He wanted nothing to do with us, paid her off to keep quiet. She raised me alone. I didn't know who my father was until she died last year, and left me some papers explaining everything." I looked up at her, my mind reeling. "So you found James?" She nodded. "It took me months to track him down. When I finally did, I reached out. He was shocked, obviously, but he agreed to meet me. We've been getting to know each other." "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked. Sarah sat back down. "He wanted to, but he said it was complicated. His father died 5 years ago, and his mother is still alive. She doesn't know about me, and James is afraid of what it would do to her if she found out her husband had another child. She's elderly, not in the best health. He's been trying to figure out how to handle it." "And the late nights? The visits here?" "I have a daughter," Sarah said, gesturing to the toys on the floor. "She's 4. James has been coming over to spend time with us, getting to know his niece. I think he's been struggling with all of it, finding out his father lied, having a sister he never knew about, trying to decide what to do about his mother." I sat there processing everything she'd said. A sister. All this time, all the secrecy and lies, it was about a sister. Not an affair. Not some terrible secret crime. Just a family complication he didn't know how to handle. I should have felt relieved. But instead, I felt angry. "He should have told me," I said. "He should have trusted me with this." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "I told him that. He said he would. He kept saying he would. But I guess he never did." I stood up, clutching the folder. "Can I take this?" "I need to talk to him." "Of course." Sarah walked me to the door. Before I left, she said, "For what it's worth, he talks about you all the time. How much he loves you, how he's afraid he's messing everything up. He's not a bad person. He's just lost." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked out to my car. I drove home, the folder on the passenger seat, my mind spinning. When I got there, James's car wasn't in the driveway yet. He was still at work. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the documents. Birth certificates showing James's father as Sarah's father too. DNA results confirming their relationship. Letters from Sarah to James, asking for a chance to know her brother. By the time James got home at 6:15, I'd read everything twice. I heard his car in the driveway, the garage door opening, his footsteps in the entryway, the sound of his shoes being removed and placed on the mat. He walked into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me sitting there with the papers spread out in front of me. "You went to see Sarah," he said. It wasn't a question. You have a sister, I said. He pulled out a chair and sat down heavily across from me. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I know. Why? My voice cracked. Why couldn't you tell me? Did you really think I wouldn't support you through this? He rubbed his face with both hands. I don't know. I was overwhelmed, finding out my father had another family, that he lied to my mother for decades, that I had a sister I never knew existed. It felt too big, too complicated, and I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of how you'd react, of what it meant about my family, about who I am. My father was a liar. What if I'm just like him? You are like him, I said quietly. You've been lying to me for months. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I know, I'm sorry. I kept meaning to tell you, but the longer I waited, the harder it got. And then I didn't know how to explain why I'd waited so long. So you just kept lying? Yes. He looked at me with devastation in his eyes. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. We sat there in silence for a long moment. I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to tell him how much he'd hurt me, how the secrecy had nearly destroyed my trust in him, how I'd spent weeks thinking the worst. But I was also tired. Tired of the tension and the fear and the not knowing. I met your niece, I said finally. Sarah showed me pictures. She's beautiful. James's expression softened. She is. Her name is Lily. She's 4. She likes dinosaurs and refuses to eat anything green. Sarah seems nice. She is. She's had a hard life, but she's strong, kind. I'm glad I found her. I just wish. You wish you'd handled it better? Yes. I gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. I wish you had too. This didn't have to be a secret, James. I would have understood. I would have supported you. But instead, you shut me out. You made me feel like I didn't matter, like our marriage didn't matter. You do matter, he said urgently. You matter more than anything. That's why I was afraid to tell you. I was afraid you'd see me differently, that you'd think less of me. I don't think less of you for having a sister, I said, but I do think less of you for lying to me. He nodded, accepting that. What do we do now? I don't know, I admitted. I need time. I need to think about whether I can trust you again. Can you? He asked quietly. Trust me again? I looked at him across the table. This man I'd been married to for 12 years. This man who'd lied to me and shut me out. But also this man who was clearly struggling with something huge and didn't know how to handle it. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. Eventually. But not right now. He nodded, tears sliding down his face. I understand. We sat there until the sun set and the kitchen grew dark around us. Neither of us moved to turn on the lights. We just sat in the darkness, two people trying to find their way back to each other. In the weeks that followed, James and I started the slow work of rebuilding what he'd broken. He told me everything. About how Sarah had first reached out, about their initial meetings, about his struggle to reconcile this new information with everything he'd thought he knew about his father and his family, about his fear of telling his mother and what it might do to her. We went to couples therapy. We talked through the betrayal and the hurt and the breakdown of communication. It was hard. Some sessions I left more angry than when I'd arrived. But slowly, we started to make progress. I met Sarah and Lily properly. We had dinner together, the 4 of us, and it was awkward at first, but gradually became easier. Lily was indeed obsessed with dinosaurs, and she warmed up to me when I showed her pictures of fossils from a museum I'd visited. James finally told his mother. It was as difficult as he'd feared. She was devastated, angry, betrayed. She didn't want to meet Sarah at first, couldn't reconcile this new information with her memories of her husband. But eventually, with time and therapy of her own, she came around. It wasn't perfect. There was still hurt and resentment. But she acknowledged Sarah's existence, and that was a start. As for James and me, we're still working on it. The trust isn't fully back. I still have moments where I wonder what else he might be keeping from me. Moments where I check to see if his shoes are by the door or if his car's in the driveway. But we're trying. He's trying. He's made an effort to be more open, to share what he's thinking and feeling, even when it's hard. He comes home every night and tells me about his day, including the parts about Sarah and Lily. He doesn't disappear anymore. His shoes are always where they should be. I'm trying too. Trying to let go of the anger and hurt. Trying to believe that people make mistakes, that good people can do terrible things when they're scared and lost. Trying to remember why I fell in love with him in the first place. Some days are harder than others. Some days I look at him and see the man who lied to me for months, who made me question my own sanity. Other days I see the man who is genuinely remorseful, who is doing the work to fix what he broke. I don't know if we'll make it. I don't know if a marriage can fully recover from this kind of betrayal. But I know we're trying, and for now, that's enough. And on the nights when I wake up at 3 a.m. and reach across the bed, his side is warm. His shoes are by the door. His car is in the driveway. He's home, and he's staying, and maybe that's enough to build on. Maybe trust is like those shoes by the door, something that has to be placed there deliberately, every single day, until it becomes routine again. Until it becomes natural. We're not there yet, but we're trying to get there, one day at a time.